Hello everyone, all two of you, how are you getting on? I've just set myself up to watch this in the chat box, so let me just turn the audio off on there. Who have we got today? Is chat working? Anyone sending anything? No. Okay, so if you were watching last time, you'd have seen me basically put the three laminations together, get the rough shaping done on the outside. What I've done since then is cleaned off the shaping on the outside. I've finished cutting out the mouth area. That means that I can now get the iron in. It sits nicely in there. And the waste piece of material that came out of the middle lamination, I turned into a temporary wedge, which works jolly well. Now what I did was I had to gradually move the mouth forwards until the iron would cut. And at the moment it will only just pass about 7 thou shavings, so it's quite nice and tight. We can take shavings of about 2 thou with very good support at the front. So the next thing I need to do, oh sorry, one other thing I didn't tell you there. With the wedge in nice and tight, holding the iron so it won't shift around, I then, with the iron slightly back from protruding, so just held back a little bit, I then flattened the sole, because this little thin strip here will deflect when the wedge is in nice and tight. So having got it deflected, I flattened the sole, and now with the iron properly set, the wedge in, it has its flat sole, it will take nice thin shavings. So what I've got to do now, or what I want to do now, is replace this wedge, which although it looks quite nice, that shape on the end, it's very difficult to get out, and indeed I have to use a pair of pliers to pull it out, which is no good in everyday use. So I'm going to make a slightly longer wedge that can be hopefully tapped out with a hammer. And the other thing which I'm going to think about doing is putting a little button in the back to strike, to remove the iron, to bring the iron up a little bit, and a button on the front there to strike, just to set the iron a little bit deeper. Now over on social media I offered a number of different types of wood to use for that wedge. Seen most popular was this, which is African blackwood, which is very handy because I've got this strip which I make my custom dovetail markers out of, which just happens to be the right sort of size for the wedge. So I don't need to thickness it anymore. I can just cut my shape out, and I've gone ahead, traced around the wedge on there, and extended it with a little striking area. So the next job is to cut that out. I've also found a little bit of ebony, which I'm going to take up to the lathe after this live stream, turn it into a cylinder, match that diameter to a drill bit that I've got, so that I can then drill in the front there, pop a button in, and in the back another strike button in there as well. So, oh hi Michael, and hi Lego Man, how are you doing? Any questions, just pop them in the chat. I am occasionally glancing over at my laptop where I've got the chat set up. I've got no one helping me today, like last time, so don't worry, I will get around to any questions you pop up there at some point or other. So, cutting out this wedge. It's quite a difficult cut. I've managed to get it, hopefully you can see, the wedge, the grain will be virtually parallel, but down here it's floating away, so sawing it's going to be tricky because I've got an end where the strike's going to be. So I've got a closed end there. So I've got to cut in this way and that way. What I think I'll do, since it's just a short piece, is cut down here and then pare away this straight bottom side of the wedge with a chisel. I wasn't very happy when the choice for black wood was made because it's very difficult to see any marking out on it. I'm just checking for square on the bottom of that wedge. That's actually very good. So now I can saw the top side of the wedge and the little curve on the end. I've made the curve a bit like the front of a dreadnought battleship, which the idea is to help the shavings to spew out of the front of the plane. See if I can set you up to see how I'm doing this. Okay, so this is my little fret saw station. This raises things up a bit closer to my eyesight and gives me support when I'm using coping saw or a jeweler's saw as I'm using here. Yeah, thank you. I've seen Stavros and I think he does some great work, doesn't he? David W. No, I don't think I've heard of him. Yeah, if you want to put links into those, the other viewers might be interested. If you do post links in the comments, you might find that they don't appear straight away because they'll often be seen as spam and I'll have to authorise them, but I'll check on that later on. I cannot see that line that I'm cutting to. You probably can't see what I'm cutting either, since I move those away. That's better. So there we have a wedge, very roughly shaped. That should be too large to begin with because I marked around the existing wedge, so it's always going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's get an idea of just how big it is. If I can find the iron. Ah, there it is. that's too tight, so we can attack that now on the top side of the wedge with a plane. Everything else looks nice and straight, I think. Oh, it's slightly bellied, so on the bottom side, let's just straighten that out first. I'll see if I can find a longer paring chisel. I don't think the chat will go into the YouTube comments. I'm not sure, but if you can put them in the comments once the video is posted, that'd be really great. Thank you. If you're ever working with black wood like this, do take the precaution of having some air filtration or dust mask or something going on. If you work with it for any length of time, it's quite an irritant. I'm just watching the live stream over on my laptop, and it seems to be a good probably minute behind what I'm actually doing. which is quite odd. So we're getting in, but it's quite slow. Don't like to plane too thick in the blackwood either, because it can chip quite easily. In fact, it's going to be interesting to see how it holds up as a wedge. Obviously it's going to look lovely, but it might break after it's been used for a while. You might wonder why I've got it so low down in the vise. Well, a couple of reasons for that is, one, it won't flex from side to side, whereas it would if it was higher up. But the main thing for me here is I'm trying to make sure that this edge is square to the sides. And if I do it this way, I can rest my fingertips on the vise jaws and gauge exactly 90 degrees. Now we're just poking through the end there, so a little bit more just to bring it towards the top of the bevel. I may still need to do an adjustment on the bottom side, because I want the very front of the wedge to be pressing down hard on the iron, and there can be a slight hollow in the underside of the wedge. So that is virtually there. I'm going to check that against the light. It wants to travel another 1/8 of an inch down the iron, but I want to check under here. Sorry, I want to check between the wedge and the top of the iron, just to make sure no light's coming through. And there is some light, so I need to make a slight adjustment underneath. So by hollowing slightly here, when we press down on the wedge, it can go down further, springing the front and the back end down hard against the iron. Just got a little bit more in this area to remove. little bit here. I don't know how long you viewers have been watching my channel, but I did used to do a yearly competition called Tool Make, and that's where I first found Stavros and his great tool making, and his channel I know has certainly done well. Since he's been doing that, it's become quite popular. Now I want this to be slightly hollowed, but I don't want the surface to be lovely and slick, because the wedge will just slide straight out. So just finish it with some 120 grit. Well, it's close but not quite there. I think this is probably the most fiddly bit in the whole plane making process. Still not quite there, so I think I'm going to have to actually take a piece out of the end here. I did cut it away from the line, so let's still try and fit it exactly where we want it. That's going to be great. That's nice and tight now. I've got to cut back slightly on this profile to make sure it's behind the bevel of the iron, just to avoid any shavings getting caught under there. And then this back end, I need to shape that. I made a few sketches earlier on. Shape it something like that. So I'll push the wedge in as far as it needs to go to hold the iron for a decent cut. If you follow on social media, you've seen me testing it yesterday. on this little piece of pine. When I was cutting that way, well today I'm going to be cutting the other way. Okay, so that's a reasonable cut. Not quite laterally adjusted correctly, but you can see now that the wedge has gone slightly further than it needs to go. So I need to trim that back. To there. And now I've got a hook on my wedge, I can pull it out. The idea is I should be able to tap it like so. So rather than sawing that the end of the wedge, I'll just use a chisel and pare it. Try to do it so you can see it, but that's a bit more awkward for me. Bill Carter, yeah, I've seen Bill Carter's work. He does some great stuff. I'm actually on a weekly Zoom meeting which he attends, and he's done some great talks on there about his plane making. If you're interested in that, if you look on Instagram under, what is it? Bench Talk 101, I think it is. You'll find a link for the meetings that happen every Thursday evening at 8:30 local time here in the UK. So I'm almost there, just to take a little bit more out of there. This must be, well, I'm thinking it's probably quite a boring video today, just playing around with a little wedge. And what I've done, the same as yesterday, I've forgotten to video this, so I'm going to have to repeat much of it to put together the full video for this build. Almost there. Setting these planes up, I find, because I'm not so used to it, I'm more used to the metal planes with all their adjusters. Setting these up can be, for me, a little awkward. Well, that looks about right. So that's a little bit shallow. You see it's not spilling the shavings out from the side, so I'm going to put a little bevel on the front of that wedge, which will hopefully throw the shavings out. Now, because it's a shoulder plane, some of the time you want the shavings to go one way, some of the times the other, depending on which side you're using it against. So what I'm going to do is put a bevel to both sides, and hopefully that'll do the job. I'll do that just with a little file. Try and speed things up a little bit. Very much hit and miss this. Doing a plane where you just want the shavings to spill from one side, you can make the opening here the right size to throw the curls out. So it's coming out my side perfectly okay. Just happens to be the wrong side for this particular rebate. So it's spinning from the one side, not the other. So a little bit more work, I think, to go on that. Anyway, I won't hold you up any longer. I shall go and turn this piece of ebony, and next time I'll be fitting those little buttons front and rear, and hopefully finishing off the plane. I've just got to mark out here the back of the wedge, so that's a nice comfortable shape to go into the palm of my hand, and it'd be a coat of board linseed oil, I think, on all of that. So I'll hopefully see a few of you next time. I'll just check for any last questions there might be in there. Nope, doesn't look like it. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again next time. Cheerio.